Satnam, yogis, yoginis, hello and welcome. We're going to continue today with the Yoga Sutras. We're going to go to the Sutra number 3 and 4. Yesterday for me, maybe it was today for you, if you're watching them in a row, we were covering 1.1 and 1.2. So let's just remember what these were. Let's check with the, like this. Atta Yoga Nushasanam, and this was now after, well, let's read it from the book. Let's read a shorter one because this is a very long translation. Let's translate. Let's use this book. Okay. Atta Yoga Anushasanam, and now the exposition of yoga is being made, and we were going into number 2. Yoga's Chitta Vritti Nirodha, the most famous of lines from the Yoga Sutras, and the one which contains, in essence, everything that is coming afterwards. The restraint of the modifications of the man stuff is yoga. And we were talking about mind and consciousness and the union of both. And I was talking a little bit about these waves, these vrittis. And I was using some analogies with waves. And I was talking about it, but I think maybe some visual drawing might help to try to get a feeling of what we are doing. So let me get a pen. I would not be myself if I don't do any drawings, right? Yesterday I didn't do any drawings, and I was like, maybe that concept of waves would be better understood with this. So I was saying, what happens when there's two people. Yeah. This is person A. Let's do stick figures today. And this is person 2, person B. Yeah. And we have a certain wavelength, a wave like a thought, certain kind of thought waves. Now, if we are in harmony, what we could imagine this is that our two waves get synchronized. So imagine this is wave A and then wave B, that's A, and B is synchronized with wave A. This is similar to when two instruments play together in an orchestra, and they play the same melody, the same notes. Isn't it a little bit blue, this page today? Let's see if I can change this a little bit. Yeah, there we go. It looked bluish, very bluish. Still a little bit blue, but much whiter. So when two waves are aligned, they are in synchronous. What if this amplitude of the wave, they add each other. So the resulting wave, the outcome of this, is a wave that is this big. So this amplitude, this is A times B. Why am I explaining this? Well, because the vrittis, yeah? We were talking about chitta vrittis, the movements, these vrittis. If we are in alignment with someone, if we are in harmony with someone, these movements are going to be even bigger. Now that can go in both directions. That can be in the karmic and in the dharmic. You will surely all have experience being in a group of people, and a group of people, they got excited for something, and then you got excited yourself. So maybe you go to a football stadium, for example, or a demonstration in the street protesting against something. I think that's a good example. These are two good examples. One is more positive. Let's say your team has scored a goal, and the other one is, they raised your taxes and you are getting angry, for example. So your team scores a goal and there is a wave of emotion. And now look, we talk about waves and we talk about waves of emotion as well. I talked about yoga as being the union. One of the unions that we have to experience is body, emotions, mind, spirit, all in one line. Well, it happens to that waves are something that we can relate it to the emotions, we can relate it to the thoughts because we have thought waves. We can measure them with a electroencephalogram, and we can measure emotions as waves, like a wave of emotion came over me. So both of them are going to behave in this way. And what happens is that if I am surrounded by other people and they are all experiencing a wave like this, and we are synchronized because in this case, the goal is happening at that moment. So that's the point of starting of the wave for everybody. So that's very easy to synchronize. And so everybody's experiencing this wave of euphoria, and then thoughts also manifest as waves. That's coming out of you, and that's going into this magnetic field around you. And because it's not just one person or two people, but maybe there is like 100 or 1,000 people experiencing this wave goes over you. Yeah, it washes over you, and it's because of our capacity to resonate with these things. Yeah, because of our empathy. Unless you were a person who is absolutely closed off to any kind of empathy to what's happening around, you would be totally apathetic. Maybe you are in such a depressed state or such a hole, or you're having a problem so big in your life that you are closing yourself completely to the outside world. Then you would not be feeling it so much. But any other person being in the middle of that stadium and feeling that wave is going to feel the emotion going up. And if you are from the team who is losing, that emotion is going to increase, but not the emotion of euphoria, excitement, happiness, but it's going to be a different emotion, but also it's going to go with the waves. Yeah. So the same thing with a demonstration. The people are getting angry. We are getting to the parliament or whatever, and now the shouting is getting higher, and something happens. The police enters, and now everybody is getting very excited. That wave of emotion will also be affecting you. However, in that case, it's probably not so synchronized unless they are doing some synchronized chanting. And this is the reason why chanting is so powerful, You will not move us. You will not move us. You will not move us. Something like that. Whatever. You are all chanting at the same time. Why do we do that? To synchronize ourselves. And when we are all synchronized, the power of the wave becomes much, much, much bigger. Makes sense, right? I don't remember where it was, but I remember this story about how there was some revolutionaries. I don't know if it was Cuban or maybe some other nation, and they were revolutionaries. They were fighting against the government to remove the dictatorship that was right there, and they were saying, I don't know if somebody asked them or something. They were saying, "We will win because we have songs." Right? When the military comes out and to try to disband us, we have our songs and we can chant the songs, and the songs is the thing that is going to give us the strength. Interesting, eh? Because song is a way to synchronize ourselves. Another example is in the military, when they are doing the march, all stepping in the same rhythm, all working at the same rhythm, walking, and maybe they have to go to a battle, and it's 2 hours away. You have to walk for who knows how long, maybe 10 kilometers with all the gear on top or marching, But they are doing in the same rhythm, and you would think, well, by the time they get there, they're going to be exhausted. Actually, by the time they get there, they are so synchronized, so in tune, that they have been amplifying each other's energy. Because this amplitude you can measure it as energy. This is energy. All this is coming for the Yoga Sutras. I promise it will make sense. Yeah, just bear with me, just a little bit of patience. So when there is big movement of waves that are synchronized, the waves increase like that. But sometimes the waves are not synchronous. Sometimes the waves are if you take one, if A is like this, and B is desynchronized, and maybe like this, the outcome is going to be a much less, well, not going backwards, that would not be correct, but you're not very sure how is the outcome gonna be. Yeah, I mean, I would have to calculate it. Yeah, every time it goes up, both go up, and you add them, and sometimes it goes through zero, sometimes not. So what happens is that there is gonna be a lot of disturbance. We can call it noise or a disturbed form of wave, right? So I gave an example like the scoring of a goal in a football match. That's a way that all of them get synchronized. But when we are walking in the street or we're in the underground or whatever, every wave around us is desynchronized. So the feeling that we are receiving is this one, noise and disturbed. Yeah, and this is affecting us. So whatever emotions are floating by and whatever thoughts are floating by, they are going to be affecting us and we're going to be influenced by those waves. Okay? Another thing, we don't just project waves in like one dimension like this, right? But I gave the example yesterday of a pond and dropping a pebble into the pond and how it makes some circles. You drop the pebble and you will see these lines from above. Yeah, if we are looking from above and we drop the pebble, ping, this is the surface of the water, and there's going to be all these waves coming out. All right. But what happens if we throw another pebble here? Well, this one is also gonna project some waves. And when you these waves, what you see here, if we looked at the surface of the paper like this, yeah, this, like this, you would see this. From the center, you would see waves traveling outwards, going outwards. So it's the same as this, but just in 3 dimensions. Well, 2 dimensions because this is paper, but you have to imagine that is the 3 dimensions. Well, the moment that the two projected waves of these 2 stones meet, here, there's going to be some interference. Yeah? And it's not going to be a nice, beautiful, simple circle going out, but there's going to be all sorts of shakiness and movements and waves. Okay, so this is 2 minds, 2 brains thinking. Now, why do we say to wake up very early in the morning? Amrit Vela, we call it. Because very early in the morning, most people are asleep. And when people are asleep, especially like all around you, your house, your neighbors, they are all asleep. Their waves are very, very soft. And the wavelength is very low and the amplitude is very low. So there is not much interference. There is not much noise and disturbances in this magnetic field, in this mental field around us, mental and emotional, psycho-emotional. So when we are in that state and we close our eyes, we meet ourselves. Because most of the time we are influenced by waves from the outside and we are we plus everything else. But when everything is quiet and we close ourselves, we have a direct meeting with ourselves. There's nothing else that can disturb you, just yourself. So if you are disturbed, that's on you, right? So it's taking responsibility for myself. So waking up in the Amrit Vela is, going to nature. Why going to nature helps? Because nature, most animals live in harmony. There is some form of harmony, even if there is, battle of survival in many ways, in many levels, in many contexts, in different kinds of areas of nature. If you go to Amazon jungle, you're going to find, animals eating other animals. But even that, there is a certain harmony into that nature. When you go into nature and you try to, you close your eyes and you concentrate to go into meditation, again, you are meeting yourself more really than meeting, trying to close your eyes in the middle of a train station, which there's nothing wrong with that. Actually, the opposite. I recommend going to the train station and recognizing, if you can sit in the middle of a train station and open your ears, you will hear like every individual wave. There's many people talking generally in train stations. Everybody who is talking has their own wave, but because nobody's absolutely synchronized, the result, if we add many, 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 many waves, the resulting of adding many, 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 like tending to infinity, it's going to be this. Yeah? Until actually, if you keep adding, eventually they get zero. It gets to zero. I don't know if you got this, because when one wave goes up and one wave, let's say the person, this was A, and B goes the other way around, down and up. This is something I mentioned yesterday, but I didn't explain it. If you add them, A plus B, well, if A goes up and B goes down and they are the same amplitude, A plus B is going to be zero. So this, if A is doing noise and B is doing noise, but they are the opposite noise, the frequency is the opposite, the result is zero. So silence. And this is how some cancellation headphones would work. Some aspects of cancellation headphones. You can put them on, and whatever noise is outside, it gets cancelled. Well, depending, whatever noise, the more neutral is the noise, the easier it is. If somebody is speaking directly to you, because it's a very particular wave, it's not something like this or something like this, it will still come through. But the idea is this: if you know which kind of sound is coming out, if you have, for example, the engine of a car that is doing tum 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 tum, and you know exactly the kind of wave that it produces, and you can copy the wave, invert it, and project it at the same volume, amplitude, right next to the engine, it would cancel each other and the engine would be silent. It would be, it's impossible to get it perfect, but it could be pretty good. So if this can happen between two people, when you have an infinite number of people, we don't, but if you're in a train station, you have maybe, 200 people around, which is, better than two, so it's getting closer to infinity. So the noise is starting to cancel each other, and it just becomes a very loud noise, but it's neutral. So going into the middle of a train station when there is a lot of sound, but there is no much fluctuation, that's also a good spot to close your eyes and meet yourself, because your wave is distinct from the others. A different situation that can happen, then let me give another example, because all these things are relevant when we are meditating. And I don't know, I'm an engineer, so I apply what I learned to yoga. So maybe you will appreciate this, maybe it's boring you, but if so, I will just be a few more minutes and then I will move on to something else. We can have like a very strong wave, a carrier, and then a little modulating wave. Well, the outcome of these two, that's going to be in line with this carrier, but you would have something like this. Right? You get it? Remember, every time I'm talking about waves, I'm talking about people. I'm talking about maybe two people thinking or two people meditating. So if you have a strong enough will and the density of your presence, let's say, you can move people around you. You can motivate people around you to do things that they don't feel motivated to do with the presence of your wave being strong enough. And then the others are subtly affecting that wave that you are projecting, but they are riding on top of you. So you can see some people have very strong waves and they attract other people who want to be like them and who want to feel like them, and they put themselves into their presence and they slowly modulate themselves until they can themselves create that kind of wave. This is teaching. This is exactly teaching. It's the same. Or a leader in a company, but okay, let's put it with teaching. When you are a teacher and you have a group of students, when we were in the train station, the antenna is receiving all these waves around us, and we have to somehow meditate. When we are teaching, we are not receiving, we are emitting. So it's like this antenna is tuning to a meeting, and then you are the one who generates all these waves. And then people who can come closer to us, they can tune themselves in to this wavelength. Okay, so this is very interesting to relate to what is the role of a teacher. The role of a teacher is somebody who has worked on their capacity to tune in to very subtle frequencies. You can say like God, Guru, it's a sort of frequency that is vibrating out there. And, words, in the beginning was the word was God, the word is God. God is words is frequency, is vibration. So you can tune into that. It's very subtle, but if you can tune into that, you have the carrier wave. And then you can project that. So teaching is just somebody who is capable of tuning into that frequency and then emitting it again. Kind of like in cities where you have an antenna who's going to pick up a particular radio and then it's going to become the antenna to emit that radio in that zone. So in that area, you're going to be able to listen to your FM, which is like a modulated frequency. FM works kind of like this. And you're going to pick up a radio signal because there is an antenna there to throw it out. So in the same way, a teacher can be vibrating Wahuru, 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 and you can be in the street or you can be in your environment, in your class, and the students may be with the eyes closed, they may be in silence, but you are Wahuru, 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 and you are projecting that wave all around. So that's how waves affect. Now, because of this interference and because of this noise, this is going to be, when there is all these things, it's going to be harder to tune into ourselves. But let's come back now to the Yoga Sutras. What the Yoga Sutras is telling us is make this line go to zero. These waves, the wave of thoughts, the wave of emotions, let it go down to zero. And in a way, when you get to zero, when you can get to zero, what happens is you are in a perfect space of silence to listen. And in that silence, if you can listen to the hukam, to the command, to this carrier signal of Guru, radio Guru playing around you, if you can capture it, then you can just become like an antenna, emitting it as well, and not interfere in any way. I've experienced this a lot when I do as Satnam Infinity, hello, welcome to the stream. I know I'm streaming at very strange hours because this week I just want to do one stream every day. Next week I will go back to regular hours. I wasn't expecting to see any of the regulars, but I'm glad that you are here. You could join us. So I was just sharing that when I translate for Shiv, I translate quite often, Shiv Charan. And I used to translate quite often, not anymore, but I used to. I would be sitting right next to him and he would be speaking, and that would be his wave that he was translating from Guru, right? And I was translating, and I had to make myself as transparent as possible. The words that I was hearing, they were coming through me. I had to translate them within me into Spanish and then get them out and not put any part from myself, not put anything of myself. So he would be the carrier signal, and I wanted to make this wave as flat as possible so that I was not interfering, I was not creating interference, I was not changing the message. So the role of being a translator was actually excellent. It was really, really nice to learn to make my own thoughts and emotions as zero as possible when when I'm doing that job, that seva of translating. But the funny thing is, Shiv was translating from Guru. So he would be connected and he would be channeling this information, and I would be connected to him, and I would try also to translate that information, but as clean as possible. So making the my personal wave as flat as possible. So if I had any opinion of what he was saying, it would change my way of translating immediately, or I would get caught up, words would not flow so well. So I had to be having clean and neutral in everything. And neutral means exactly that. It's not positive, it's not negative, right? It doesn't go into the positive, it doesn't go into the negative. It's neutral, it's zero. Yeah, this is the neutral. So this is what we are expecting to get. So imagine this thing. Now close your eyes for a moment if you can, and try to imagine this concept that there's stones thrown on a surface of a pond and the waves that it produces. So if you can close your eyes for a moment and imagine being next to another person, or no, let's say walking in the street. You're walking in the street and there's all these waves around you. And have this idea that every thought you think, every emotion you feel is going to create a wave. And a wave that is not synchronous with the others is going to create disturbance and noise. So next time you are outside with some other people, walking around the city or something like that, imagine that you are a waveless entity, just floating around in the surface of the pond, and feel the waves around you. You will feel the wave of this person who is crossing in front of you, and there's some anger in them, and this other one seems kind of frustrated and worried, and you will feel all these waves of psycho-emotional waves, yeah, these thoughts and emotions floating around. Can I be as flat as possible? Can my wave be as flat as possible? And then the idea from yesterday or from the previous video, oil is denser than water. Can my presence be like oil, that other people coming next to me, their waves will become quieter? All right, Satnam, you can open your eyes. I invite you to explore this next time you are outside with people. Okay, so what happens if you do that? Well, now we come to the third sutra. Hopefully this was clear. I bring some concepts from science to help explain how it feels. It helps me. This is what helped me because I'm a very scientific guy, but let me know if it was of any use to understand it. So let's go to the third. So when the mind field and emotional field has been reduced and restrained, and the modifications, the vrittis, the movement, the waves have flattened down, have quieted down, what happens then? Well, okay. Tada drastu swarupe avasthanam. Then the seer abides in itself, resting in its own true nature, which is called self-realization. Let's take a look at them. Take a look at the book. Tada, there are two. This is not focus, is it? There we go. Swarupe Vastanam. Avastanam. Tada means then. Drastu is Purusha, the witness, which is often connected to the self, is related to the self. But I will explain this a little bit better. Swarupa. Swa is its own. Rupa is form or nature, like essence, your own essence. So your own essential nature, Avastanam, abides, stabilizes, establishes, settle, remaining, being in a state, appearing, dwelling, resting. Okay, interesting. You remember that Atta Yoga Anushasanam, we were talking about how the word asanam contains asana, which is like a comfortable posture. So it's like a resting posture, like a sitting posture. So who is resting? Who is sitting comfortable? Is it the body? No, it's the self. The seer is resting. The seer is the witness. It's witnessing something. What is it witnessing? Well, it's witnessing its own fundamental form. So let's read these translations. Then the three that I'm most concentrated on are these three, but maybe we can take a look at the others as well. Then the seer abides in itself. We read this one. Satchidananda. Then the seer, the self, abides in his own true nature. At that time, the time of concentration, the seer, Purusha, rests in his own unmodified state. It's also talking about the spirit, the self or the spirit. When the mind is controlled. This makes me think of this line in Japji Sahib from Guru Nanak when he says, Manjit e Jagjit, conquer the mind and you will conquer the world. And it is this idea that people go outside to the world to, grab things from the world, get power on the world. But actually the most important power is the power to control your own mind. If you control your own mind, you control your own world. Your own world is yourself, yourself. That's the most important. But let's take this slowly. Remember, it starts with tada, which means then. Now that's very revealing, isn't it? Because then implies there has been a movement. There was something, and now then something else. And if you remember when we were starting the first line, Atta was now. So now we see a connection between Atta and tada, which is, okay, now we're going to study about yoga. Now we're going to talk about this discipline of yoga. And yoga is when all this mind field, this field of consciousness that has been disturbed from the mind, from the emotions, from yours, from others, when all this mind field, when cessates, the waves cessate, stop, and calm down. Then, okay, so he's saying, okay, the yoga is done in the now. This is what we do now. Now we do yoga. We do yoga in the now. So stop, be present, because this is important, what you are doing right now. Even if you are breastfeeding a child, or you are washing your dishes, or driving your car, what is happening right now is yoga. It's not something that you will do when you go to class and you do some postures in the afternoon or in the evening. No, yoga is right now. And if you do yoga, if you get your waves calm, then, then the seer, Purusha, rests in its own fundamental nature. It rests in its own fundamental nature. Well, what is its own fundamental nature? That's Satnam. Yeah, what we say here to salute, we say Satnam. Satnam means true identity. That's your true nature. So the seer, the one who looks, and remember, this is not the mind. It's not the mind who is looking. It's the consciousness behind the mind. It's not Chittang as the conglomerate of this 4 different forms that we were talking yesterday. So it's not this, yeah? It's chitta, the consciousness, not necessarily the mind, yeah? So the seer, the one who is looking, the problem is that the mind and consciousness are intertwined, but the moment that you can separate them, because the waves occur on the mind but not on the consciousness, but these ones affect this one. So the moment that you can become conscious and then you can flatten the waves, then that consciousness can rest upon its own satnam, its own true nature, its own self. So I'm talking about Purusha. I have one diagram around here. This diagram is from the mind course as well. I'm not going to go into detail with it, but just because some of you I know have watched a lot of videos, and if you have, I think it's good to connect the many different topics that we have been talking about in the last 100 or so videos of this channel, and this is one of them, the cosmic manifestation into being, this idea which is developed in Samkhya philosophy and later on in Vedanta, starting from the Yoga Sutras, and there is the idea of the Purusha, or the spirit, or the consciousness, and then Prakriti being the manifestation of that. And we live here, and I mentioned when we were doing this is a very common diagram from Samkhya, that it's actually a map. It's a map of the journey that you do with your consciousness as you meditate. And we are down here, caught through the 5 senses, the 5 indriyas, caught on the 5 elements, tattvas, around us. And we have to go inwards through pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. We will see this in the Yoga Sutras in later videos. But through the process of what we will see, that we are going inwards and upwards, and then the consciousness goes up through the different layers of subtlety of manifestation of the creation, the different layers of subtlety in the manifestation of the creation. Kriti, creation, the kar, the prakriti, and this is very subtle and very gross. The most gross is what we can see and touch and smell and taste. So, and hear. So this is the most gross, this is the more subtle. As you meditate and go more subtle, we are raising our Purusha towards the Purusha. So our consciousness towards the universal consciousness, the one God. So this is, when it gets here, this is union. This is yoga, the literal meaning of yoga being union of my personal consciousness with the universal consciousness. So that journey is for Purusha. Purusha is pure, like the pure aspect of yourself, your true essence, your pure essential form or essential nature, your swarupa. Yeah. So, so the witness, the one who is looking, rather than looking outwards into the world, excuse me, you're looking towards your essential nature. And this is why in a Kundalini Yoga class, with every exercise that you do, almost every exercise, you are inhaling Sat, you are exhaling Nam. You're inhaling Sat, unless there is some form of breath, different breath, like breath of fire or Sitali or something like that. If you're just breathing naturally or deeply, you're going to be vibrating Satnam, because that's going to help the mind to focus into Satnam. Rather than let the mind be hypnotized by the outside world, you capture the attention of the mind with the mantra and guide it towards the meaning of the mantra, Satnam, the true essence. So the seer, the one who wants to look out, which when we are talking about consciousness, is trapped by the will of the ego, the false self, the ahankar. Okay, because we look outside, and then ahankar, the part of me that likes and dislikes, is deciding what we look at. Is telling us, yeah, look at this, look at that, and go there and grasp those things. So this is the one who is ruling. This is the false self, the false sense of self, not the swarupa. This is the false sense of self, ego, ahankar. So rather than looking up, the seer says, now look towards your true sense of self. Yeah, so in a way, it's like looking down. Infinity says, I think it's not a union between personal and universal consciousness, rather a realization that they're already one. Yes, but we feel that we are separate. Yeah, the feeling through the power of Maya, we experience it like we are separated, and our individual consciousness has been not united to the universal consciousness in the sense that we are aware of that, but rather we have been hypnotized by the ego, by our false sense of self, the individualization that we have been developing from birth, especially until 7 years old, and then it continues. So that sense of me, that part of myself is telling me who I am. That is not true, but it's telling me, oh yeah, you are a yogi or an engineer, and you are a father, and you are all those things. My consciousness has been attached to that. And yes, it's true that on a certain deep level, but very, very deep and covered by many layers, it's true that we are one with the universe and with universal consciousness, but we are not aware of that because our personal consciousness is not looking to there, is looking towards what my mind is thinking. Therefore, the experience is not one of union. So when we say yoga being the union of the personal and the universal, is when our personal stops being hypnotized by the ego and the hankar and starts to realize that actually I was never separate from the universal. And then you have that realization that you're already one. But this is kind of like a subtlety, yes? I think it makes sense to understand this with the diagram of the self. This is from another video. I find this very, very important. There is the higher self, the false self I was just talking about, a hankar, yeah, linked to a hankar, the ego. There is the real self. This is the swarupa that we are trying to wake up. And there's the hidden self as well, the inner demons, let's say. So rather than looking out, so when the Purusha, the seer, when the seer is looking out, rather than looking out, is telling us, look in. Yeah, and the path to go in is the path that Patanjali will go on to describe. But rather than look up, looking inwards. And if you look in and you go inside into the real self, I don't know if you know this diagram, Infinity, but there is one. This is from one video on the self. When we look in and we go back to this self, there is still a veil between yourself and the universal consciousness. So they are joined, but there is a veil in between, and this is the concept of lifting the veil. The veil, sorry, not the whale. I keep saying the whale. Lifting the veil, yeah, to realize. Self-realization is about first to realize myself, who I am, who I truly am, come back to rest in myself, and then realize that self is not separate from the universal self. But there is a certain veil in between. So it's a two-step process, kind of. There's actually many levels of samadhi, but this is kind of the path. I was using this diagram to explain a concept. I hope it doesn't confuse and it doesn't add another layer of complexity to the conversation. But if you want, you can just reduce it to this. There is a false sense of self, the ego. There's a real sense of self. That's the Satnam. And if we could place it somewhere in the body, we would place it in the heart. This is where we feel that we are. And the self-knowledge, self-realization, it's about this. It's about getting to this sense of self, this real sense of self. So this is what the third sutra is telling us. That when we manage to let the vrittis cessate, stop and calm down, then we can rest, yeah, we can live, we can abide in the essential form, in our essential nature. Still the veil is imagined by the mind. Sure, okay, but it's very real imagination, right? It's a fallacy, but it's a very real fallacy because we experience it as so. And yes, in the very end, it's like I don't know if it was Osho that was saying we are already enlightened. Well, yes, but we are not. We don't know, and because we don't know, then we are not. So we have to get enlightened in a way, no? So it's good to know that that's the objective, and yet there is a job to do. There is some effort to do. There is some discipline to get there, because it's not the same to know that it is than to experience that it is. Yeah, in theory, the veil is an imagination. In reality, no matter how you know it is an imagination, it's still there, and we can know right now when we are awake that dreams are not real. But the moment that we close our eyes, then they become real, and then you're in dreams, and it takes a lot of effort and discipline to wait a moment. I'm in a dream, and I'm seeing my mother in the dream, but actually, it's my dream, so it's my mind producing this image of my mother. So this is not real. So that same awakening that you can have in a dream, that awakening has to happen in real life. And at some point in real life, realize that everything you see around you, it's all the one. And if you don't see God in all, you don't see God at all. So be able to see God in all. But the veil becomes very real, even though it's false. It's like when people say Maya is an illusion. Well, not really. Maya is a very real sense, a very real power, a very real force that operates in this planet, in this existence, and it creates a very apparently real feeling of separation. Now, the being separated, that's an illusion. But the forces of Maya which are affecting us, that's not an illusion, that's real. So we need to cross that barrier. Can you make a video on Kashmir, Shaivism, and Spanda philosophy? It speaks on that, but it also integrates the scientific doctrine of energy and vibration that's now discovered in quantum physics. I don't know anything about that, but let me take a note. Infinity. I have a few videos I would like to do. I want to do a video on the law of attraction as well. Somebody asked me in the comments of one video, but let me take a note on that. Kashmir Shaivism. Spanda philosophy. I'll take a look. Thank you for the suggestions. All right. So, where are we? Chitta vritti, nirodha, and then when the waves cessate, then the Purusha, the seer, abides in its fundamental form. So our consciousness is resting in its own nature, is resting here, living here. Right? Okay, let's go to the next page. And these Sutra 3 and 4 are kind of very connected to the second. And these 4 first sutras are going to be what I mentioned about the seed that is going to become the whole tree of the Yoga Sutras. So this is the seed that contains all the essence. Then we go into explaining. But let's go to the fourth one. Vritti Sarupyam Itaratra. So we come back to the vritti. We already talked about this a lot. These waves. This is vritti. This is all about vrittis. Sarupyam. Sarupyam. Identification with form or nature, similarity, conformity, assimilation, assumes the form of or the appearance of. Itaratra, at other times, in other states, elsewhere, otherwise. So let's read Gyaneshwara translation. At other times, so when the seer is not looking at his own nature. Oh, look, here we have another one that says something like that. At other times, when the seer is not in his own true nature because the mental waves have not ceased, the seer falsely experiences himself as having assimilated and identified with the mental activity or with the objects of the mental activity. So we believe what the mind is saying, we think that's who we are. So when one is not in self-realization, the seer appears to take on the form of the modifications of the mind field, taking on the identity of those thought patterns. At other times, the self appears to assume the forms of the mental modifications. At other times, when not concentrated, the seer is identified with the modifications. Okay, I promised that the waves would make sense. They are going to make sense, hopefully. Some of you will remember this diagram on the 5 levels of consciousness, also from the course, the mind course. This is a fundamental diagram. This is something everybody should be really, really familiar with. If you haven't watched this video, you really need to do that. This is very, very important. There is levels of consciousness, and we're talking chit. Chit is consciousness. So chitta vritti nirodha. The chitta vritti are these waves. Yeah. And this is happening here. You saw this diagram yesterday and today. These are the waves that are happening here. So what is below is in the subconscious, what is above is the conscious. And as we look at these waves here, the conscious self, the seer is this one. Where's my black pen? Here. This is the seer. And this is the thought waves. So my mind is looking at the world and producing all these thoughts that are manifesting here. Semi-consciously, we are hypnotized by these waves. Now the seer who is here, the consciousness, is looking down. And these waves are projecting what is happening outside. So sometimes a metaphor that is utilized is that this is like a mirror, and we are reflecting the outside. Yeah, we are like a mirror looking out, and we are reflecting that image. It's sort of something like that. Let me see. So there is this, I am reflecting what is coming from the outside, the image that is coming from the outside. I am perceiving it. But this triangle here, representing the mind, has some waves. Now I wanted to pinch and zoom. Imagine so much using the tablet. I was just about to pinch and zoom to make it bigger. That's funny. Okay, so here there is the fluctuations. So what this means is when the guy who is here, the seer, looks into the surface, is going to see the projections of, or the reflections, let's say, the reflections of everything that we are observing. And so we are caught up, the consciousness, the seer is caught up by all these waves. Or, let me make it in another color, we could turn this triangle and reflect what is down below. This is our heart with our Satnam, our real self. If you look at this, drawing, this is the 1 and the 9. This is the deepest part of yourself, and in a way, it's connected to your soul. This is many layers of subconscious, and when we did this course on the mind, we talked about how we need to clean the subconscious and we need to train the mind to stop being so wavy. Well, when the water is quiet enough and transparent enough, clean enough, that means that the subconscious is clean enough, you can, looking down into the water, and the water is flat, you can see all the way to the bottom. And here there is a jewel. Yeah, there is some hidden jewels here in the bottom. This would be like going back to seeing down into your essence, your Satnam, your most profound essence. So this looking down is equivalent to looking down and having this wave flat. The chitta vrittis are flat, and you can see through all the way down. If you look down and there is waves, what is going to happen is that you can try and imagine it, that you put yourself like this, you're in front of a table or on the ground, you do like this, and imagine that was the surface of water. And if the water was calm enough, you would see a reflection of yourself. Yeah. You would see this beautiful self. Okay? Now, if it's calm enough, if the chitta vrittis are calm, when you look down, when you do this going inwards, then you find yourself. But if this is not calm, if the surface of the water is anything but calm, then the perception is not going to be this one, but it's going to be, I'm going to make it here. It's going to be this. So what we are going to be seeing is the carrier wave with the modulation on top. That means all the noise that is on the surface of these waves, on the surface of my thoughts, are going to be affecting the way we see ourselves. And this is why self-analysis, to auto-analyze yourself too much, that can be detrimental, because we are generally very tough with ourselves, and our waves are already very agitated. And when we look to ourselves to try to judge how we are in the world, we tend to be very critical, and we see ourselves very ugly, let's say. We see all the faults in ourselves, and they seem magnified because we don't see it truly as we are. We see this distorted perception. Hopefully now all this idea from engineering about waves makes sense, that when we go into ourselves and when we look down and we try to see who we are, the perception is this, it's not this. So what Patanjali is telling us is that when the vrittis, when the waves are very active, at other times, so when the vrittis are very active, we identify with these vrittis. We identify with the form of the vrittis, not with our true form, swarupa, but with the form of the vrittis. So we think we are these wavy lines. So we identify with those thought waves, thoughts and emotions. So coming back, yoga is in the now, yoga is happening now, and it's a discipline. And through this discipline, you learn to restrain all the waves, oscillations and waves from your mental state and your emotional state, all your inner states, and your consciousness gets stable and flat. And when you do that, you can rest in that state in which you are aware and you see your true nature, your true self. That means the mirror has turned and we are looking at ourselves with no waves. You see the green line is flat. There's no wavy line. So we see our true self as it is. If we do not, we will identify with the waves. If we don't do that, is not only that we are going to see distorted, we are going to think we are the waves rather than the face that is being shown. So it's like when you are looking down, you're going to see your face reflected with all the waves. But if the waves get flat, you see your face flat, clear as it is. And also, as a side effect, also you see two things. You see yourself reflected in the water, and if the water is clean enough, then you see the most deepest part of yourself, your universal self. And then you can see they are both connected and they are both one. Then the veil may lift. And as the veil lifts, I'm using a lot of diagrams today, then as you look down and you realize you're not only this self, but you're also the deepest part, and then the veil lifts, and then you can say, yes, we are all one. And then you realize it's not just self-knowledge, but it's self-realization. One is, yes, I know this is the self, and the other is to realize that and liberate yourself. And that's when you come one with the one. That was a very intricate example with lots of diagrams coming from engineering, showing my background, but hopefully brought some light to the idea. So let's try that. Let's try a little bit of that. If you can close your eyes, please close them. If you're driving or something, then do it with the eyes open, but be very aware of what you're doing. And because we have been talking for a while, your mind may be active. Notice it, and all these thought waves, they are just floating in that ocean of your consciousness. And this is the power of consciousness. The moment that you bring your awareness to that, all the anxiety, all the nervousness, all the emotions start to calm down. All the thoughts, all the patterns start to come down. And you realize that you are awareness. Remember the pond and the drop of the little stone in the pond? You are one point in this ocean around you. Let's try to produce the less ripples, as less as possible. Remember the water and the oil. Have this intention to densify your awareness, make it even stronger, your attention more focused, more one-pointed. Whatever wave may come from the outside gets softer and flatter as it comes closer to you. And stabilize that state. Takes a while. There is thoughts which come and try to pull away at your attention. like little pixies coming and pinching you and trying to get you to open one eye and look in one direction or another. Stay calm, stay in this surface, like oil surface, dense, flat awareness. If you put the tip of your of your tongue in the upper palate, it will help. Don't think too much about it, just do it and then don't think about it. Just keep the tip of the tongue in the upper palate. You'll feel your presence getting stronger and the inner channels of energy open up. You will feel more sure of yourself and you're more aware of what you are. You're floating in this ocean of consciousness. Resting. It's a paradox because it's resting, but it requires effort. It's a discipline. Thoughts will come at some point or another, and you can see them as what they are, a wave. You can stay calm in the flat ocean of consciousness. Just see the thought pass by and you don't identify with it. But then if I am not that thought, if I am not those waves, who am I? I am the one who is aware of those thoughts and also aware of being this ocean of consciousness. Look towards yourself. Make the seer look at your true nature beyond all the waves. Looking in, looking down to the source of this looking. Things may try to distract you. It could be your physical body. It's okay. It's just a wave. Looking in, looking down to the source of the looking. And in the source of that looking, there is this feeling, this pulsation, this pulse of I exist, I am, I am. And the one who is saying this is your true self, your Satnam. I am Satnam. I am Satnam. I am Satnam. And that is the carrier wave. Different from all the vrittis of the mind and the ego. It's Radio Guru vibrating within. I am Satnam. And you can rest there. If you remain aware, you will see some thoughts will try to come and grab your attention, or maybe emotions, fears or doubts. That's okay. You don't have to fight with them, but you need discipline to stay abiding, living, breathing your true nature. And when you get stable in there, you can stay there and not depart even after you open your eyes. And you can open your eyes. Train yourself to stay there. With the knowledge of the self. And we may have a little experience one day, and hopefully someday we will get to be fully realized and fully stable in that experience. And there is challenges to get there, and there is practices to get there. And all will be described by Patanjali in the following sutras, when he will tell us what are the challenges to actually be stable in that state, and what are the practices we can do to help us get there. And I think it's enough for today. I hope it was of service. I thank everyone for watching, and I thank everyone who is supporting the channel, everyone who subscribes, and everybody who is members, and they support the channel economically as well. It allows me to do these videos and dedicate a lot of time to prepare. I appreciate everyone who is watching, and if you enjoyed it, please drop a like, drop a comment. Tell me how was this waves diagrams that I did for you. How do you understand these other two sutras, 3 and 4, or the fourth, 1, 2, 3, 4? And I will come back tomorrow of my tomorrow. Maybe for you it will be a different day, but I will come back tomorrow and do another video. I explained that this week I'm going to do an intensive on Yoga Sutras every day, streaming a little bit. And then we will go back to regular stream hours and I will put them in the channel. And I think it was like Tuesdays and Thursdays, we will go back to our regular schedule. But for now, we got to a very nice state, a very nice place. Thank you very much for joining me in this journey and this discovery of the Yoga Sutras. If you have learned this, if you have studied this with some of the teachers, please share with us your wisdom, and so we may all benefit. Thank you very much. See you next time.